Hi, everyone. I'm Juliana Forlano. Welcome to Act Now. Hope you had a nice Thanksgiving holiday. On the program today, Professor Richard Wolff is joining us to talk about something that we talked about at my Thanksgiving table quite a bit. Literally, the talk at my Thanksgiving is why can't we find things in our grocery stores? I think it really hits people hard to find out that their grocery store shelves are bare and empty. And after that, I'm going to talk just myself with you, beautiful viewers and listeners, about the intersection between mental health and economic decline. So stay tuned for that. I promise I won't depress the hell out of you. And if you're already depressed, this might make you feel slightly better. So stay tuned for that. That's our show. Coming up first, Professor Richard Wolff. Joining us now on the program, Professor Richard Wolff is coming to talk to us about the issues around the supply chain. Professor Wolff, thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So we've been talking a lot. We've spoken before on this program. You've been speaking on Economic Update and in other places about the supply chain issues secondary to the pandemic. But when I saw this article on Medium talking about the pandemic is only part of the problem, I thought you would be the perfect person to have a conversation about whether the supply chain thing is just indicative of deeper economic crises.
Yes, I think that it is. I think that's an important insight. And I think it's one that the mainstream media are, I'll be polite now, downplaying way beyond what they ought to. Let me put it this way. You know, we had a crisis at the beginning of 2000. We ended up calling it the dot-com crisis of our economy. And then we had the even worse one in 2008 and 9, which we later called the subprime mortgage crisis. But both of those crises are different from this one that we're still going through, the 2020-2021, in two ways. First, the numbers are scarier. A larger number of people lost their jobs. A larger number of people have not come back into the economy after leaving it, and so forth. But here's the other one. The crises are now becoming something you can tangibly feel, even if you haven't lost your job, even if you haven't suffered in terms of your income, because, as you put it, you go to the store, you go whatever that store is, and the shelves are not as plentiful as we've become used to. It isn't there, whether it's the grocery store or the car dealership or the department store or the hardware store. What's going on? Here's the deeper message. We are having serious problems in our economy, and they can no longer be restricted to one area or to one part of the population. They're becoming general. They're becoming important to affect all the dimensions of our lives. And there is no other conclusion you can draw other than an already troubled economic system is having more troubles. And we shouldn't be surprised, because neither Mr. Trump and the Republicans nor Mr. Biden and the Democrats have been able, either separately or together, to deal with our problems. That's why our inequality gets worse, and that's why the shelves in the stores are troubled.
Yeah, I literally, those are photos I took yesterday. Hold on, the ones that I had up on the screen a second ago. Those are photos I took yesterday of where the lettuce and peppers and tomatoes and fruit is supposed to be at the grocery store that I go to. And, you know, my sister was talking about not being able to get cat litter. You know, we're not talking about everything all the time. I even noticed in some of the big box stores and BJ's, they used to have 10 different types of toilet paper. Now they have one, the BJ's kind of toilet paper, and that's it. It's an interesting shift that people are going to have to make to understand that we're not going to be able to get everything exactly when we want it, like we did, pre-pandemic.
Americans, used to watch on occasional television shows, National Geographic or somebody showing you poor people in some sad situation in Asia and Africa and Latin America and so on. And there you could see what an economic crisis meant. People couldn't get running water. People couldn't get milk for babies. And Americans thought, oh, that's some kind of problem they have. Isn't it wonderful? We don't. Mm-hmm. Well, welcome to the new world, friends.
Well, I think
do.
And
it's very similar roots to these problems.
Oh, good. Well, we're going to talk about that as well. I think what's most striking to people, and I like to call the mainstream media the make sure you're misled media, and they've got the old everything's okay going on, as you mentioned. Even I think the Biden administration has this sort of tone of like, well, if we just build more bridges and we do this, everything will be okay. If we give, do these 5 things that Democrats will do, give you half 15 cents on the 400,000 that you actually need to run a society in a just way, that everything will be okay. And it's interesting to me that now these empty store shelves, these food deserts are people who are in the middle class are starting to have the same issues that people who are in, the poorer classes in our country have been having all along, that nobody's been covering except for, you, us, etc. There's a few good people out there, but not really the mainstream media. They only cover it, say, during the pandemic when regular people's, middle class cars were lined up around the block to get a box of food at the local mall. I remember seeing those images. What do you make of the fact that those kind of things, those empty store shelves, are now in the middle class area?
It's a little bit like watching a cancer metastasize to spread. A capitalist system is a highly stratified system. We all watched a few weeks ago when Elon Musk and Jeffrey Bezos and maybe a couple of other billionaires competed with one another about who could sit in a little rocket ship and spend 10 minutes in space. And, we didn't want to pay too much attention to the hundreds of millions of dollars it took to do all of that. The spectator in us didn't want to ask, why is that something only a handful of very rich people can do? We didn't want to ask, gee, if that money wasn't spent on being able to be in a rocket ship for 8 minutes, if you're a billionaire, it could have filled the supermarket shelves for many of us. We don't ask those questions. But that doesn't mean the reality isn't there. And it's just spreading. You're absolutely right, Juliana. It is spreading. More and more people cannot be carried when you have an economy that gives such a disproportionate amount of its wealth to a tiny group of people who are, by the way, already the wealthiest. The statistics are unambiguous. Over the last 20 years, not just 2 years of pandemic, over the last 20 years, over 90% of the increase in wealth in the United States went to the top 1% of our people who are already the wealthiest in our society. If this strikes you as perverse, well, then let's leave the realm of the statistics and then go to the realm of the tomato in your supermarket that isn't there anymore because the wealth needed to get it there has been given to Elon Musk, who now ranks as the wealthiest person in the United States.
That
It's
is so
absolutely
interesting. I don't think people have made that connection, and I really appreciate you doing that here on our show. I really, people I've talked to, I just don't think the connection is being made that the reason there's no tomatoes in the store is because Elon Musk is getting a tax break.
Yeah, and the resources, people have to understand, resources can easily either be used this way or that way. You can use your truck to transport the tomatoes to the warehouse, to the supermarket, to your neighborhood when you go shopping, or the truck can be used to transport a component of the rocket ship that carries Elon Musk for 11 minutes in space, so he can talk about the money he's spending on getting a ship to go to Mars. I mean, he's making sure, because that's what a billionaire does, I can move the resources to what I want because I can offer more than 100 million people in a mediocre economic circumstances. I can make it profitable for that truck driver to work for me, not for the tomato folks. So I mean, it's very practical, it's very real. And in a capitalist system, the people at the top, when the system starts to have trouble, they want to hold on to what they have. So they kick down.
Yeah.
So the cost of a declining economy is pushed downward onto the people least able to cushion the blow, to defend themselves, to be in a position to hold on to what they need.
Which is very interesting because now those people are middle-class people. You still can't get a tomato. The interesting story, the idea, I want to shift a bit to inflation because these are related, supply chain issues and inflation.
Very much so.
Let's talk about the connection there. The idea in the mainstream media is that the pandemic was ending, which it's not. Now we know there's yet another variant coming at us, but the idea that's been fed to us about inflation is that the pandemic is ending. So people are buying things madly, more than ever before, more than they did before the pandemic. And that's what's snarling up supply chains who can't keep up with this explosion in demand, which always begs me the question, where are people getting all this money to buy all these things that they have, that they need more of? People have been out of jobs. People have, and are you buying more food? There's no food on the shelf. You're not buying 15 bags of oranges. You still only really need just the one bag. But so what is that a fallacy that we're being fed? And what is driving inflation?
Good. First of all, it is 100% fallacy. It's false. You should not be taken into it. It is a cheap way to somehow blame the failure of goods and services to come to us in the normal way on us. We are buying too much. It's the buyer, it's the consumer, it's the average person whose activity of buying is sending everything into a spiral. If ever there was a case of blaming the victim, this is it in economics.
Which is interesting because it also makes people, people who are at the bottom be really more mad at people who are in the middle, who might still have purchasing power, instead of those at the top where the blame should really be.
That's right. And that's one of its attractive aspects for the people at the top who, after all, own the mainstream, or as you put it, the other way, media.
Make sure you're misled media.
Right. But here, let me give you a simple statistic that shows what nonsense it is. Prices of goods over the last 12 months have risen, according to the U.S. government, by 6.2% as of the month of October, last October to this October. Over the same period of time, average wages in the United States went up, it's a little hard to be precise, between 4.5% and 5%. In other words, the increase in people's ability to buy has not kept up with the prices. Not only are they not able to buy more than last year, they're not even able to buy what they bought last year. There is no explosion in the demand for goods and services for a simple reason. The vast mass of the American people have not gotten a wage increase even big enough to buy what they bought last year at the now 6.2% higher prices. And there's no evidence that they've borrowed vast new sums. And you know why? Because they're already tapped up. They can't borrow beyond what they are already unable to carry. So it's a fakery. It's an attempt to distract you from what the issues are. And here, basically, are what they are. In the capitalist system that we live in, the number one goal for every business is profit. That's what they'll tell you. Profit is our bottom line. Profit is what we're in the business to do. If our profits go up, so do our share prices. If our profits go up, the executives get a bonus. If the profit goes down, the reverse of all of that. So what the companies do, they do everything they can for profit. They had a problem over the last 2 years. We had an economic crash, and we had at the same time a pandemic. That's once in the history of a country to have these two horrible things happen at the same time. So for many, 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 many companies, their profits took a hit over the last 2 years. And you know what they're doing now? They want to make up at least some of the profits that they didn't make last year and in the first part of this year. And they're doing everything they can to boost their profits. And one of the first things every businessman and woman thinks about when they want to get a nice boost in their profits, get ready, is to raise their prices. That's what they do. And let's remember who raises prices for the goods and services we buy. The government isn't in the price business. The employees never determine the price. It's a very small minority of our people. They're called employers. They make up maybe 2-3% of our population, if that. They're the ones who set prices. So let's ask the question, why would they do that? Well, we don't have any problem with the answer. They tell us the answer. It's making a profit. That's why they raise their prices, if they think they can get away with it. And that's what we're living through. Businesses raising their prices in order to recoup the profits they didn't get last year and this year. And we're all left having to pay the bill. Last point. When businesses raise their prices to get more profits, they have a problem. We, the public, don't like to hear that, because basically what they're telling us is, we want to make more profits, so we're sticking you, the public, with higher prices. It's good for us, the employer, and we're taking it out of your pocket. Excuse me.
No problem.
This is so unpopular that if you're an employer, you get desperate, here we go now, to come up with something else to say. Oh, no, I'm not raising prices to make more profits. Heaven forbid. I'm doing it because I have to pay my workers more. Or I have to buy my inputs or to service my machinery. You see, it's not me, it's somebody else.
Won't these reports be coming out, and the public will be able to see the profitability of the different companies, after when January comes and people have
Absolutely.
to report their
It's usually a matter of weeks or months before the reports come out, but you're going to see a remarkable thing. When the profits look better, those reports will be focused on the stock market to get investors to buy shares. For the general public, oh no, here we got to tell stories either about how we're not doing it by hiding the profits, and accountants will do that 12 ways to Sunday, or you will admit that your prices went up, but it's not you, it's not your profit, it's because you had to do all of this. And now for the supply chain part. When you jack up prices everywhere, you put a lot of businesses in trouble. If I'm a business that I have to buy, I don't know, steel shelves, and suddenly they go up 20% in price, guess what? I'm going to make do with fewer of them. I'm going to postpone buying them. And you know what that means? The ones that I have that are old and rusted, they're going to start breaking down. But I'm going to wait because I don't want to pay these horrible high prices. So when the shelf breaks down, I got nowhere to put the tomatoes. So
Right.
I tell the tomato wholesaler, don't bring me tomatoes. And the customer, what do I tell the customer? That I'm saving money off of by buying, having cheap shelves? No. I start
Supply
talking
chain issue.
about magic and mystery. The supply chain, whatever that is, isn't working. And then the great one these days, blame everything on the pandemic. Everybody nods, the pandemic. Oh, yeah. Look, the pandemic is a gift to millions of businessmen and women who can get away with explaining what they do for their profits as if it was their way of being impacted by this terrible pandemic. Crocodile tears if ever you thaw.
Gosh, I could talk to you all day, but I do know you have to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
So there's two more questions I have. One is, Professor Wolff just released Understanding Marxism in hardcover, just in time to give to all your Christian relatives to celebrate the birth of their savior, the socialist. So I suggest going out and getting that book immediately. You can get it at Democracy at Work on the web. Professor Wolff, if people actually understood Marxism, what would they understand about where we are in our economic collapse right now?
Here's what they would understand. Every economic system in the history of the world, villages, tribal, slave systems, feudalism, every system in the history of the human race for many, many, many centuries has been showing us the same pattern. It's born out of something else. It evolves and changes over time, and then it dies away. We don't have slavery much anymore, or feudalism, or much in the way of tribal systems or village systems, and so on. So there's no question in my mind, and in any reasonable mind, that capitalism will display the same trajectory every other system has. It will be born. Well, we know that happened. That happened in England 4 or 5 centuries ago. It will evolve over time. We know it's done that too. And you know what the next step must be? It passes away. But what I have to say, and I know this will be a bit of a problem for some of the viewers and listeners, we are living through a passing away of capitalism in one country right now, and that's ours. We've had our time. We've had a century in which the United States has been the #1 capitalist wealthy country. It was a wonderful ride up. But as everyone else has learned in the history of our species, it's a much less fun ride down. We can manage it, but we better face that we're in that situation. Otherwise, some of us will be enjoying rocket ship rides, and the others of us will be wondering why there are no tomatoes at the supermarket. But it's two sides of the exact same process.
Okay, Professor Wolff, in the last minute that we have here with you, which is probably definitely not going to be enough time. We already spoke about how the economy would not be able to handle a Delta variant resurgent, and now this week the big reports are on another variant coming out of South Africa, the Omicron. Oh, yes. There's. I thought Omega was the O for the Greek alphabet. Anyway, would you comment, please, on if this thing gets out and runs wild, what happens now?
We're going to have the same thing. We're not prepared. We weren't for the first run. The world is watching as the capitalist system we live in fails to deal with these issues, fails to plan, fails to cope. Let me remind everyone, the United States, the richest country in the capitalist world, the dominant economic power of the last century, With 4.5% of the world's people, we have suffered 16% of the world's deaths from COVID. That is a disastrous failure of doing something so fundamental that every economic system is evaluated by it. Have you preserved the public health? And the answer in the United States is a big fat no. And now we're facing another one. This is a system that is already in trouble. Having failures like this, especially when you add them to having lost the war in Afghanistan and I could go on, and you all know what I would point to. These are signs that a system is fading, a system is declining. And the sooner we stop denying it, face it, and talk about it, the better the chance we'll have to come out of it without being taken down by it.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Professor Wolff. I really appreciate you being on the program. Don't forget to catch Professor Wolff on Economic Update. You can find him on YouTube. He's Prof. Wolff on Twitter. Thanks again, Professor Wolff. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Juliana. I look forward to our next meeting.